Yo, what is going on, guys? It's Bengt. Welcome back to another video. In this one, we were talking about the two hardest challenges that you are going to have to face along your self-improvement journey and probably in your entire life. And it's stuff that not a lot of people talk about. When we come to the idea or the topic of self-improvement, a lot of times it has to do with the physical world. Everybody likes to talk about habits and discipline and physical things, right? Like going to the gym, eating healthy, waking up early, meditating, journaling, all these things, right? And those are all great. You should do all of them, and they'll probably help you in different aspects. But at the end of the day, there's two things that you need to conquer, and that is the death of your ego and the healing of your inner child and your spirit, right? And those two things will quite literally push you to the bounds of what you think is possible for yourself and will force you to confront the deepest, darkest things inside of your psyche. And if you're not prepared for that, which, by the way, no one can prepare for that, nothing can prepare you for that. These are things that I feel like in my personal journey have been like the ceiling, right? Like I've done a lot of the physical stuff. I've done a lot of the, going to the gym, eating healthy. Like I've got a baseline level for self-improvement, habits, whatever, that kind of thing, the baseline level of disciplines. That stuff I've got, like, but the big jumps, the big actual improvements, the big things that are going to make you feel like you're actually making substantial progress in your life is when you can conquer those deeper, darker, much more complex and challenging things. Like, we'll start with ego death. Ego death is extremely fucking difficult because at one point you realize that like you are selfish and you realize that everything in this world is, you start to see the truth in things and the truth in people, and sometimes that's uncomfortable and it makes you completely dissociate from the world, and you don't really know what's real. You don't really know what's going on anymore. You kind of just like, you lose a touch, you lose your footing in the physical world, and that can be really difficult sometimes. And when you're going through that ego death, it's very challenging because a lot of times you're like building yourself up and stripping yourself back down as far as, your identity and what you believe in and the things that are important to you and all of this stuff. And you're kind of just like trying to really chisel away and get to the core of like who you are and what you really want to do when you're here. What is your actual purpose? And the ego death question, like it all comes down to why. Why am I this way? Why am I doing this thing? Why do I want to do this? What should I do? Like, all these questions. A lot of it's just like, why, right? And the more that you keep asking why, the closer to the center of the onion you get. You keep peeling the layers back, right? And then once you get to the deeper, to the core of the onion, right? That's when we start to tap into like the uncomfortable truths and the uncomfortable answers. When you start asking why, and you keep asking why, and you ask it enough times, eventually you get to something that happened to you, or some event, or some person, or some place. And all these things are very uncomfortable truths that you have to like wrestle with, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the things that stop us from reaching our maximum potential, like if you take a moment right now and pause and visualize, what would the greatest version of yourself be doing right now? Like in a perfect world, like your maximum potential, what does that look like? And I think the biggest gap, the biggest difference between the reality we're experiencing right now and the reality of our greatest potential is the difference between us healing from the wounds that our inner child has. And if you think about it, it's like, okay, all the things that you hate about your life right now, all the roadblocks that you're experiencing, all the things that you don't like, all of the deep personal issues that you have, you weren't always like that. You know what I mean? Like, we are products of our environment. And so we need to retrace our steps back to the very beginning. Like, there are certain things undoubtedly that happened to you when you were younger as a child that made a deep impression into your psyche, and there's a response to that. And a lot of times the negative things that are holding us back in life are the negative responses that we have to childhood trauma. It's like we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect that inner child that still exists in our brain. And some of the things that spawn out of that self-defense, those mechanisms work okay in childhood, but as an adult, they're absolutely destructive. And working through those things and identifying those things and pinpointing them and being able to retrace back to the exact moments that those big events happened, and working through that and unpacking that is something that's going to dramatically increase your ability to see your life clearly, to identify the weaknesses that you still have and actually be able to fix them. I guess what I'm trying to get at and what I'm trying to say is, like, if you're not able to dig deep and wrestle with the things that affected you as a child, you'll never be able to like fully blossom and bloom as an adult. And I think that this is like probably the deepest level of self-improvement that you can do, is like conquering the ego and experiencing ego death and coming out on the other side and being okay with that, and, you know, still existing with that. And then also the ability to tap into the deeper, darker parts of your psyche, the negative things, the trauma responses, all the things that have affected you since you were a little kid. If you can reflect and go back and figure out why those things happened and how they affected you, and you can cope with that and you can heal from that, that is actually the key, because those are the same blockages, like the responses that you had to those events that happened when you were little, right? Like I said before, a lot of the negative ones, a lot of the negative habits or, you know, mindsets or belief systems that you've adopted to as a result of those traumatic experiences, they served as a survival mechanism then, but now they're actually holding you back. So you need to like unwind and unpack those things and reframe those events in your actual mind. So I guess when it comes to like getting over it, that's the part that needs to happen. You need to identify those events, replay them in your mind, like literally go back. And you can do this with meditation. You can do this. Sometimes it happens to me when I'm like dreaming or like I'm lucid. I'm kind of like half asleep but half awake, and I can like interact with my thoughts in a different kind of plane. But if you can go back and from a bird's eye view, kind of like you're watching over the shoulder, like a movie of yourself. And in those events, you can see the thing that happened and see how you responded, but change the narrative, change the story that you tell yourself about that event. And that'll start to begin the process of unwinding that negative response from yourself, right? And also there's a lot of things that we can try and do when it comes to, you know, repairing relationships. And once you go back and identify some of the things that happened to you, like, for example, maybe you didn't have the greatest relationship with your parents. Maybe you didn't have a productive or a good relationship with one of your siblings, or, you know, any authority figure or something like that, right? Like it's personal to you, but one thing that you can do is make an effort or make an attempt to try and repair some of those relationships. And I know there's going to be people that jump down my throat in the comments. Oh, dude, I could never, you don't understand, this thing happened. And, you know, I could never see eye to eye with that person, whatever. I get it. But at the end of the day, it's more so important to identify the pieces, identify the things that relationship left you lacking, right? So like if you didn't have a good relationship with your mom or with your dad, you might be psychologically, you know, missing that component of having like a strong masculine role model or a nurturing, caring, you know, motherly figure that you can like trust and that's there for you and that is like providing unconditional love and attention and affection, these kinds of things. So it's like you don't necessarily need to replace or like reheal your or rekindle relationships with people that are obviously bad for you. Don't do that. But what I'm saying is the things that you're missing, try to figure out what actually caused that and how you can replicate or like readjust your relationship with that idea. I know that I kind of just like maybe lost a couple people, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like, is there a way that you can recreate or find a way to deal with the psychological vacuums that you have, right? So like you didn't have a father figure in your life. So now you don't have this masculine role model, and you're kind of just like angry at the world and like challenge authority figures or whatever the case may be, right? Like, is there any way that you can heal or any way that you can readjust your relationship with that father figure so you're not left with this like vacuum or this void in your psyche of like constantly trying to deal with this thing, right? So I hope some of that I hope some of that made sense to some of you guys, because this is stuff that I'm dealing with right now, where it's like going back to my childhood and finding all of those individual events and like really unpacking what happened in that moment and seeing it through the lens of how I saw it then and how it impacted me and made me feel, versus seeing it through the lens of who I am now and how it's affecting me now. And if I can shift the narrative, if I can kind of warp how that thing exists, how that memory is stored in my brain, then I can change how I actually feel about it, which can change the whole entire trajectory and like shift the timeline that I'm on, right? Where healing from this thing means like going back and re-changing how I feel about it, how that thing happened and how it affected me. So guys, those are the two things that honestly, when it comes to self-improvement, are going to challenge you, are going to be probably the hardest things you have to wrestle with. And just to recap, that is ego death and reintegrating and reestablishing your persona after you kind of have your ego shattered. And then also healing the inner child and reintegrating all of the, negative relationships that you've had with yourself based off of certain traumatic events. So I hope that gave you guys some food for thought. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you guys deal with as well, because it's definitely felt like my self-improvement progress hit a ceiling when these two things became like the obvious apparent shit that I needed to fix next to really go to the next level. So hopefully you guys found this valuable. If you made it to the end of the video, you're a real one. I appreciate you. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. We'll be back with more videos soon. If you like this one, I'll have another one on the screen right here that you can check out next. So catch you guys on the next one. Stay strong, stay blessed, stay dangerous. Peace.